I was pastoring the Chapel Oaks congregation in Kansas City when Midland Adventist Academy, a school in the area, was going to go from a K-10 to a K-12 school, and they needed to add an academy wing. There are 4 of us churches that needed to raise the funds to help contribute to that, and so it fell to me and our congregation to raise a big chunk of that. Well, I didn't really know what to do. I'd never done anything like that, and I went to prayer and Bible study and asked around. I found out that 4 years earlier they tried to raise funds in church and passed out pledge cards, and they got a total of $6,000 in pledges, but we needed $300,000 plus for this project, so I didn't know what to do. But God began to bring us insights that really helped us. We began realizing that fundraising is really faith-raising, that we needed a spiritual program that had financial results, and that we would see some benefits if we really devoted ourselves to it. And so we also looked in the Bible and looked at that story of Moses and the children of Israel, and when that took place, Moses didn't just say, okay, everybody, we're moving on. No, instead they began looking at the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire. Moses would point to it, and then the leaders would take action to mobilize all the forces to move toward the promised land. And we said, let's break it down into these 4 simple steps. First, a generous God. That's who we're looking to. And second, an empowering leader. Third, a growing team. And fourth, every willing person involved. And here's how we broke it down. First of all, the generous God. We said, look at how God has already been generous to us. We had these conversations in the church board and Sabbath morning and testimonies. We said, God has blessed us with lots of students at the school. We have teachers that are dedicated. We don't have any major conflicts in the school or the church or between the churches. This seems like a ripe time to move forward. And we had a hospital in the area that was willing to give a major grant and to help us train and develop a program. So we just started by looking at the generous God who had given us these things, and ultimately we voted as a church board and in church and business session to move forward with a capital stewardship campaign, a fundraising campaign to last 3 months, but to ask for commitments during that time that would be for 3 years. So we started with a generous God. Then the next part was an empowering leader. That really was my role. I couldn't lead the charge. We needed lay people who would lead the charge on every front. And so after prayer and consideration, we called together, we looked for a steering team of about 20 to 30 that would be gathered as a steering committee, and that we'd farm out roles. In getting that growing team or that steering committee, we wanted to find people who were committed to the Lord and His cause, who had the capacity to give major amounts as far as possible, and that had some type of connection with the cause, or were connected to people who are connected to the cause. How do you find those people? We asked those who we knew had been generous in the past, who some might be. We asked the treasury who some might be. We built our list. We invited about 30 together and asked if they would serve as a steering committee. A few bowed out for various reasons, but we took the ones that were there and we farmed out the responsibilities. Put one of the lay people, respected lay people, and a person and his wife as the captain or the leader for the steering committee. And then we divided out a prayer emphasis, a ministry emphasis, a promotion area, a secretary to keep track of records and thank the people, and an advance commitment dinner for those who were going to be giving major amounts, and a banquet for everybody, to have everybody involved, as well as follow-up for those who might be added to the church later. So at that planning session, we divided out the responsibilities and we formed our steering committee, and we asked them to go ahead and begin to add people to their teams. We also looked at a calendar for 3 months, and we said, we're only going to emphasize this for 3 months. So we put on the calendar, when is the 24-hour prayer vigil? When are the ministry visits? When are we going to have the advanced commitments dinner? When are we going to have the banquet? What are we going to do to call in advance to get people to these events? What are we going to do for follow-up? We mapped it all out on the calendar. And then we went into motion, and the teams began growing so that the steering committee of about 25 grew to have a staff with their committees of about 50. And we started walking through that sequence. And then the fourth area is every willing person involved. We wanted to involve all of our members, both those in town and those out of town. And we wanted to involve all who attended church, even if they weren't members. We wanted to involve interests, everybody we could. And so we began to have more and more people involved in the process at each sequence, each step of the way. And ultimately, what did God do? God gave us a wonderful blessing. At the end of the 3 months, we were able to announce to the congregation that 90 families had made commitments of $380,000. That year, there was also an 11% tithe increase. And we were able to see the wing built on the academy without major indebtedness. A few years later, the church congregation had enough confidence after they'd paid off those debts to relocate to a larger facility, which I don't know that they could have done that before. They needed to do it for decades. And we saw new leaders emerge and grow in faith. I grew in faith. And ultimately we had a taxi driver who said, I can't do much now, but later in his life, he donated his house to help with other projects. It was a wonderful experience. It grew me in faith. My wife and I grew in faith when we did this. We prayed about our commitment. We announced it to the congregation, and we invited people to step out in faith and watch what God would do. That's what you're invited to do as well.